Welcome back to Citizen One, exploring our urban future, and I am excited to say premium pulp fiction. I'm your host, Douglas Stuart McDaniel. This is our first episode at the start of a new year in 2026 in a world that feels simultaneously exhausted and overheated. Wars that refuse resolution, cities under pressure from climate, inequality, and political fracture. Technologies advancing faster than our capacity to govern them, institutions losing credibility while still holding enormous power. For many people listening, this year didn't begin with hope so much as vigilance. And I think that context matters because Citizen One was never meant to be escapist. It exists because moments like this demand clearer thinking, longer memory, and a willingness to stay present inside complexity rather than retreat from it. The stories we explore here about cities, systems, culture, and power are not abstractions. They are the environments we're already living in, whether we've named them yet or not. So if you're listening from a place of uncertainty, fatigue, or quiet resolve, you're not alone. This space is for people who are still paying attention, still asking better questions, and still trying to understand how the future is being shaped in real time, often without our consent, but never without consequence. So with that in mind, let's step into today's episode because I wanted to also share some important context with you. Citizen One is more than a podcast. It is an emerging, for lack of a better word, media brand where we explore stories at the intersection of innovation, culture, memory, and the past, present, and future of cities. But today we're stepping into a slightly different dimension and a kind of narrative frontier that I wanted to introduce. I wanted to take a moment to introduce premium pulp fiction properly, our Citizen One literary imprint and emerging publishing empire. This episode is also our first crossover, one that connects what we do here at Citizen One with a parallel storytelling project rooted in the same curiosity about systems, human complexity, and consequence, but expressed through fiction. It's called Premium Pulp, an independent, traditional publishing imprint I've developed where quality, depth, and risk-bearing imagination come first. At its core, Premium Pulp Fiction publishes speculative fiction, noir-inflected civic narrative, historical fiction, and narrative nonfiction concerned with power, memory, technology, and the quieter mechanics of how societies endure, adapt, and fail over time. You can see that in my debut novel, Ghost Emperor, which follows the succession wars after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE. But beginning this year, Premium Pulp Fiction will be publishing a very small number of carefully curated titles. And unlike many modern indie or hybrid publishers, we're taking the bold risk and position of fully financing our authors' book production. Our authors will never pay for book production or global distribution. They will also receive the resources to leverage an integrated marketing and publicity ecosystem built from our network of preferred, vetted, award-winning suppliers. Over the last 15 to 20 years, most small presses have been forced into one of three survival models: author-funded or cost-sharing models that include hybrid presses, assisted publishing, or thinly disguised vanity presses. Production costs are shifted to the author, sometimes partially, sometimes entirely, and the imprint's role becomes more administrative than editorial. Marketing support, when it is offered, is usually modular, outsourced, or pay to upgrade. The second category are grant-subsidized or institutionally anchored presses, like universities and Arts Council-backed imprints, or nonprofit literary houses that sometimes fully fund authors, but they rely on external subsidy. Their marketing reach is often limited, conservative or academically scoped, and publicity ecosystems are pretty modest by design. And then there are the micro indies operating on sweat equity, and these presses finance production out of pocket, but at minimal levels, basic editing, templated design, limited print runs, and expect authors to self-market aggressively. Publicity ecosystems are informal at best and non-existent at worst, and they Neither do comprehensive editing, dev editing, or copy editing, and then final proofreading. What almost never exists anymore are small independent imprints that do all three of the following at once: fully financing production, developmental editing through distribution, retaining editorial authority and risk rather than transferring it to the author, providing an integrated marketing and publicity ecosystem rather than ad hoc support. That model used to be normal. We called it publishing. While publishers exist across a wide range of sizes and models, the largest U.S. trade houses, commonly referred to as the Big Five, retain the scale, capital, and specialized editorial, marketing, and publicity infrastructure required to support broad distribution and coordinated campaigns at volume. Most small and independent presses operate with significantly smaller budgets and far fewer specialized departments. And as a result, authors are often expected to source, coordinate, or directly manage much of their promotional and publicity work themselves. This context is what makes premium pulp fiction's approach genuinely uncommon. We're structurally closer to a miniature traditional house than to a contemporary indie press. We're not simply financing books, we're absorbing uncertainty so that editorial decisions can be made upstream, slowly, and with coherence. Within that structure, the inclusion of a fully integrated marketing and publicity ecosystem is the clearest outlier. Most small presses either hand authors a checklist or provide one or two vendor introductions or rely on goodwill and improvisation. Very few embed authors into a preferred, already vetted network of publicists, designers, media prep, trailers, and positioning support. Doing so requires long-term relationship capital, not just money. So the honest framing is this, and I'm pretty excited about it. Premium pulp fiction is not rare because it's boutique. It's rare because we're reinstating a publishing contract that the market quietly abandoned, one where the imprint assumes risk, curates taste, and provides infrastructure so authors can focus on the work itself. And, this isn't nostalgia. It's a deliberate structural choice. That choice shapes our focus. Books built to last, structurally sound, intellectually grounded, and resistant to fashion. That orientation is not accidental. It reflects the belief that long-term relevance and endurance requires more than a launch cycle or a marketing push. They require structural coherence, editorial intention, and depth of engagement that only emerges through sustained collaboration between author and editor. Premium Pulp Fiction was founded by Citizen One Media to support work that understands genre as a working tool rather than a marketing label. We are interested in stories that know where they come from, noir that remembers its debts, historical fiction that treats the past as something lived rather than staged, speculative work that understands systems, worlds, and story ecologies before it imagines their collapse. Handled seriously, genre does more than entertain. When handled carefully, structurally, morally, and contextually, genre becomes a way into complexity rather than a shortcut around it. Our publishing approach intentionally mirrors that complexity. Premium Pulp Fiction will operate as an independent traditional imprint, fully financing book production for our authors, including editorial development, copy editing, cover design, layout and formatting, distribution setups, media kits, and book trailers. This will allow editorial decisions to be made on the basis of quality and coherence rather than speed or scale. Now, that work extends beyond production. We focus on positioning, framing, and long-term relevance with attention to how a book will read 5 or 10 years after publication, not just how it launches for the next 90 days. That longer view matters because a great story, like a great city, continues to live and change after its initial debut, shaping and reshaping its readership over time. The kinds of work we seek include speculative fiction grounded in political, economic, and technological reality, dystopian narratives informed by history rather than abstraction, noir fiction attentive to power, corruption, and moral compromise, historical fiction concerned with memory, survival, and unfinished business. We value narrative control, structural clarity, and voice, and we welcome humor when it emerges from intelligence rather than irony. Most importantly, we do not offer paid publishing packages. You can't hire us. We will seek out and curate strong authors. Premium Pulp Fiction is not a service press. We seek projects that benefit from close editorial engagement and long-term positioning rather than rapid release cycles. This publishing philosophy, production financed in full, editorial risk assumed by the imprint, and a limited annual catalog will create space for seriousness rather than spectacle. It will allow fiction to ask big questions rather than announce its genre category before it earns the right. And it aligns with the way Citizen One interrogates systems, but through narrative intelligence rather than analytical exposition. With that foundation in place, I want to introduce the first author signed under this imprint who exemplifies the kind of work Premium Pulp was created to support. Van Shamrai is a Ukrainian science fiction novelist now living here in Barcelona, whose work is shaped by lived historical pressure rather than speculative distance. His fiction emerges from a close engagement with political systems, social fracture, and the long consequence of collective decisions, drawing on both contemporary Ukrainian experience and broader European intellectual traditions. Rather than treating collapse as a sudden event, his writing traces how societies erode over time through institutional strain, moral compromise, and the accumulation of unresolved choices. His characters move through worlds governed by constraint rather than convenience, where survival is inseparable from memory, responsibility, and inherited obligation. The speculative elements in his work are never decorative. They function as extensions of real historical and civic forces, rendered through disciplined world building and a restrained, unsentimental narrative voice. We will be publishing the English language edition of his book, Signs of the Last Hope, scheduled for release in late spring. Signs of the Last Hope reflects all of those priorities. It is speculative in a way that respects political and historical gravity, attentive to systems as lived environments rather than convenient backdrops, and resolute in narrative voice and consequence. Its world is not a metaphor. It's an environment shaped by pressure, inheritance, and moral trade-offs that resist simplification. I'm excited to share that Premium Pulp Fiction is not here to rescue publishing nor to compete with high-velocity content engines. We're here to practice a standard of editorial responsibility that treats fiction as intellectual work, moral architecture, and imaginative infrastructure, work capable of carrying complexity without surrendering it for the sake of market clarity. That's why we exist, why we work the way we work, and why the English release of Signs of the Last Hope and Ghost Emperor and some of our other forthcoming titles matter, not simply as books, but as continuations of the narrative practices Citizen One has been built to explore. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Douglas Stuart McDaniel, and 2026 promises to be a very exciting and important year for serious conversations about our future world.